Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to unravel one of the absolute biggest mysteries at the heart of the American democratic system. We hear the phrase "we the people" all the time, right? But when you actually look at how decisions get made, things get kind of complicated. So today, we're acting as political detectives. We're going to investigate exactly how power and influence truly operate. Are things exactly as they seem on the surface, or is there a deeper structure at play here? And that brings us right to our central question, the big puzzle we're going to solve together today: who truly holds the power in American democracy? Now, if we're lining up suspects, we really have three prime candidates. Is it you and me, the everyday citizen? Is it organized interest groups working together? Or is it a super wealthy, highly influential elite? The answer we land on literally shapes everything about how we understand our own government. Okay, let's dive right into this. Here's our blueprint for today. First, who holds the power? Next, three theories of democracy. Then, systems of government explained. After that, the constitutional republic. And finally, why your story matters. Kicking things off with Section 1, who holds the power, and the three theories of democracy. As our source material so perfectly puts it, not everyone agrees about how power and influence are distributed in American democracy. And honestly, that makes total sense. Policymaking is incredibly complex. You can have different experts look at the exact same system and see completely different forces driving it. So, to solve our mystery, we need to examine three main competing theories that try to explain who is actually steering the ship. Let's bring in our first suspect, the everyday citizen. This is represented by the participatory democratic theory. This theory argues that widespread participation in politics is absolutely crucial, like it's the master key to a functioning democracy. But it's not just about showing up to vote. It's about joining what are called civil society groups, which are basically independent associations completely outside of government control. There's this famous author, Robert Putnam, who wrote a book called Bowling Alone that hits the nail on the head. He pointed out that while the same number of Americans still go bowling, way fewer of them are joining traditional bowling leagues. So instead of getting together with a diverse group of people in their community and building those civic muscles, they're just bowling alone or just with their close friends. For participatory theorists, this drop in traditional group joining is a massive warning sign for democracy. But hold on a second. Are people really participating less, or is participation just changing shape? Critics of Putnam point out that people, especially younger generations, are actually still super active. They're just finding totally new, creative ways to organize. Take craftivism, for example, like decorating public spaces with yarn. It definitely doesn't look like your grandpa's 1950s bowling league, right? But it is a highly visual, modern example of citizens forming independent civil society groups to interact and work toward a common goal. Participatory theory relies completely on this kind of grassroots, citizen-level involvement, whatever form it takes. Okay, let's move on to our second suspect. If participatory theory is all about individual citizens getting involved, pluralist theory is basically about the power of the pack. Way back in the 1830s, the French writer Alexis de Tocqueville visited the US and famously called America a nation of joiners. Pluralist theory says that the single best way to influence the political process is by joining a group of like-minded folks. Think about it. There are thousands of these interest groups out there. You've got groups like the ACLU defending civil rights or the National Rifle Association advocating for gun rights. Pluralists argued that because there are so many of these groups constantly competing, no single one of them can win all the time. So policymaking just becomes this massive tangled web of bargaining and compromise between all these competing interests. And that brings us to our third suspect, which takes a decidedly less, optimistic view of how things work. This is the elitist theory. According to this model, a small minority holding most of the economic power is actually what controls government and politics. Proponents of this theory point to the growing income gap, arguing that the top 1% of wealth holders just have a completely disproportionate amount of influence over policymaking. They'll tell you that, sure, pluralists say anyone can form a group, but in reality, groups representing big business and massive wealth can secure tax exemptions and favorable regulations way more easily than some small, underfunded public interest group. So, to quickly recap the core differences between our three suspects, participatory theory says power is, or at least should be, in the hands of individual citizens actively engaging in civil society. Pluralist theory says power is scattered among thousands of competing interest groups who are constantly bargaining. And elitist theory says, nope, the game is skewed and the wealthy 1% hold the true levers of power. So, what do you think? Which theory best describes the reality we actually live in? Trust me, political scientists are literally still arguing over this today. Moving right along to Section 2, Systems of Government Explained. Now, when building a government, every society has to figure out exactly how much power the government is going to have and how that power gets distributed. Let's think about political power as a spectrum. On the far left end, we have totalitarian governments. Under this system, power is entirely concentrated at the top. The central government claims absolute power with zero limitations. Then, moving toward the middle, we see authoritarian systems. Now, they still claim most of the power and definitely suppress citizens' voices, but they might actually allow some independent social or economic institutions to exist, so they don't exert total, absolute control over every single aspect of life. Finally, over on the far right end, we have representative democracy. The power flow here is entirely different. It's concentrated in the citizenry, in us, who then select representatives to vote on policy, making sure individual liberties are actually protected. Next up is Section 3, the Constitutional Republic. And that brings us right to our own doorstep. Let's examine the specific framework used here in the United States. Think of it as the ultimate rulebook that determines how those theories of power we talked about earlier actually get to play out in reality. A constitutional republic is carefully engineered to do a few very specific things. First and foremost, it's designed to protect fundamental rights by strictly limiting the power of the national government. It is a really delicate balancing act between maintaining order and security while still preserving freedom and prosperity. Now, obviously, having over 300 million people vote on every single law would be completely unmanageable. So citizens elect representatives to make those policies. But here is the crucial part. Those representatives are absolutely bound by the supreme law of the land, the Constitution. And remember, the Constitution literally starts with the words, "we the people." That's not just nice poetry. It's a binding legal declaration that sovereignty, the ultimate authority, comes directly from the citizens. Which leads us to our final section, why your story matters. We spend a lot of time talking about high-level theories, complex political science models, and these vast systems of government. But none of those systems operate on autopilot. I absolutely love this quote directly from our source material. People like you matter, and your stories matter as well, even if nobody ever retells them in a book. American political institutions didn't just fall out of the sky one day. They were created through the conscious, deliberate actions of real people. Whether it's a high school student trying to start a club or citizens getting together to plant trees in their neighborhood, the system absolutely requires active engagement. You really have to develop your own skills to analyze these systems because your opinions, when thoughtfully constructed, genuinely do make a difference. So, the absolute crucial point is this. The mystery of who holds the power ultimately comes right back to you. We've seen that the system fundamentally relies on participation, whether that's through your individual action or through organized groups, to prevent power from concentrating entirely at the top. The rules of the constitutional republic are laid out, sure, but they require players on the field to work. Those theories of democracy we discussed, they're just theories until people actually act. So I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought. Now that you know how power operates, how will you choose to participate in the political process today? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this sparked your curiosity to keep exploring.